Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursaleen wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'een. Amma ba'd. I welcome you again to the second lesson of this Dars Nizami feeder course. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow you to see the end of this course. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow you to walk this path of the ulama, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for you in learning and taking the deen of the Messenger sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam. We're going to start with Aqidah first. I'll give you a formal introduction to Aqidah itself. It'll carry until the prayer of Asr, inshallah. Prayer of Asr is at 6:15. So we'll take a break about 5 minutes just before that. And then I think we'll resume about 25 past or around 6:30, inshallah ta'ala. The first lesson that we're doing is on Aqidah. Anybody know what Aqidah is? Or has anybody done Aqidah? Just raise your hands. Yes? Just one person? Two sisters? Inshallah. Aqidah, we generally know Aqidah as Ilmul Kalam. As Ilmul Kalam. In English, theology, if you like. But before we start any science, we should know of certain few things which are always of benefit. If you know them, then your goal, your aim, your purpose, and what you're searching for within that science becomes clear cut. You know what you're constantly looking for, as opposed to starting a science and then trying to work out what's the purpose of this science, why are you actually studying this, where are you going with this. So that's roughly about 10 ground rules, if you like, principles that we normally go through before starting a specific science. The first thing is to know the definition of that science. What is the science that you're studying? So in terms of Aqidah, Aqidah is known in this day and age. Previously we knew this science as Ilmu Tawheed, the science of the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or the uniqueness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's his name. We look into further names of this science later on, inshallah. But let's look at his definition. His definition is huwa qawaidu yatawassalu biha ila isbat al-aqaid al-diniyya anil adillatil yaqiniyya. I'm giving you a taster of Dars Nizami in the first lesson. Aqidah, Aqaid, Ilmu Tawheed, there are a set of rules, set of principles through which you can prove, establish Islamic beliefs. So what is Ilmu Tawheed or Ilmul Kalam or Aqidah, in terms of its definition in the science, is that it is a set of principles, set of rules, through which you can attain and establish Islamic beliefs. But from where? From anil adillatil yaqiniyya, from decisive evidence. Decisive evidence. Take a note of that. So Ilmu Tawheed is a set of principles. So it's not just a set of sentences. It's not just to say God is one. But it's actually a set of principles which allow you to attain and establish Islamic beliefs. But where you take those Islamic beliefs from and what establishes them are adilla yaqiniya, decisive evidence. Decisive evidence. We'll talk more on decisive. Decisive means that there's no doubt whatsoever in this evidence. There's no ifs and buts. There's no questions as to in regards to is it this way or is it that way. It's straightforward. There's no ifs and buts about it. That's one definition. Another definition, which is slightly easier, is هو إثبات العقائد الدينية عن الأدلة اليقينية. Is just establishing Islamic beliefs through decisive evidence. What we taken out? Principles. Yes. So you got two definitions. First definition, the only thing that was added in it was that it was a set of principles. Set of principles, through those principles we prove and establish Islamic belief through decisive evidence. The second definition is establishing and proving Islamic beliefs through decisive evidence. Why two definitions? Anybody answer that? Why two definitions? Why not just give one simple definition and leave it at that? Why two?
Differing opinions.
No. Close. Keeping categories of two people in mind. Yes? Who do you think those two people are?
Ashari and Maturidi.
No. Remember, they're both part of the science. So they both have to follow these.
The layman and the scholar.
There you go. The layman and the scholar. So the first one, the sets of rules are for the scholars. And what those scholars have proven, as in God is one. That's a statement, isn't it? That belief is proven. And then you read it and you accept it. Yes? That is also Aqidah then, isn't it? But for the layman, for a scholar, his job is to prove it. So that is the definition of ilm al-tawheed or Aqidah. The science of Tawheed, oneness, uniqueness, or proving that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exists, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the only one worthy of worship, and so on and so forth. But this word Tawheed, let's look at what this means. Tawheed, in its literal sense, by literally we mean in the actual word itself, the dictionary meaning, is just to prove something to be one. That's its literal meaning. Just to prove something to be one. But in Ilmul Kalam and Ilm Tawheed, Aqidah, we have a separate definition for it as well. As in its meaning for us is to believe in the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I normally translate this as uniqueness, but for you I'm translating it as oneness. To believe and prove the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Zatan, in terms of His essence, wa sifatin, terms of His attributes, wa af'alan, and in terms of His actions. Along with having sincere worship for Him, meaning devoting yourself towards Him in worship. And if you want to put that in layman's terms, it's just to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with the belief that He is one. In terms of His essence, in terms of His attributes, and in terms of His actions. That's the layman's definition. So one definition we gave of Tawheed was that to believe that Allah is one in terms of His essence, in terms of His attributes, and in terms of His actions, along with devoting yourself for worship, meaning with ikhlas. And the second definition is given is to only worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with the belief that He is one in terms of His essence, in terms of His attributes, and in terms of His actions. Again, why two? Not exactly for the scholars here. Go to all the Sufis. Okay? We can class them as scholars as well. Ikhlas is to do with tasawwuf actions. So we tend, in this day and age, we tend to link that towards the awliya who try their best to devote their whole life in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yeah? So He's given you two. Ikhlas may seem easy to say, that we are sincere with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but the truth is it can take a lifetime to get the first level of sincerity. So hence why He's given two definitions. One is for the ulama, awliya, and the second one is for the layman. We worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala just knowing that He is one in terms of His attributes, in terms of His actions, and in terms of His essence. Do we have ikhlas with it? When a trial test comes, when we fail our exams, that's when we realize of how devoted we are to the deen of Islam and towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When your heart breaks, I've been coming to the mosque, I've been praying 5 times and I still failed my maths exam. Yes? How could this happen to me? So it shows how much ikhlas a person within himself he has. Yes? Ikhlas is such that you should have devotion with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with such sincerity that regardless of whatever happens, that doesn't break. So then it's a case of alhamdulillahi fi kulli hal. All praises to Allah in all states, whatever He puts you through. So this was the definition of ilmu tawheed, and then within ilmu tawheed, the definition of tawheed itself. What does tawheed mean? Now you got two purposes. Now you have to map your own way. You want to learn the principles, or do you want to learn the sets of beliefs? You want to learn the principles or just the sets of beliefs? The more you dig into them, the more you'll find out. The more you want to touch, or the less you want to touch, just touch the iceberg, then it'll stay at that. I.e., we can teach this in two ways. I can just read the sentence, and you read the sentence, and understand the sentence, and that's where it stays at. Second way is we speak the sentence, read the sentence, you understand the sentence, and then we open up every single word. And that's when you will get into principles, that's when you will get an understanding of where this came from. And we'll give you a taster of that as well. We normally do that in the Dars Nizami course, but in this course we'll give you a taster of that. Once we start the section on the beliefs regarding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we'll show you some evidences and then how we derive that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for example, is one. And we'll look into them as well. But in that you'll see sets of principles of how we derive from Quran, Hadith, and such and such. Rewind back a bit. I said a word, decisive evidence. What is decisive evidence? Anybody know what decisive evidence is?
The statements with no ifs, no buts, no questions, just direct.
That's what I said.
Yeah.
Okay. But what is that in Islam? Is it my word? Is it your word?
The word of God.
The word of God? Yes. What else?
Logic.
Logic, yes, but is it on the level of the Quran? No, it doesn't have to be. But it's still decisive though.
Would you say it's a command? So it's
No, it doesn't have to be a command. Anybody else? Decisive evidence within Islam. Yeah, hadith. All hadith?
Sahih.
Not exactly. Mutawatir. You've done this before, haven't you? Inshallah. Mutawatir hadith. I want you to get to this word, mutawatir, okay? Because it will cover a lot of things. Mutawatir is decisive evidence. Danish, there's no pen in this. Hope this one works. Mutawatir. Get used to reading it like that. Mutawatir. When we do Dars Nizami, that's how we read it. We don't have harakat. Yeah? There's no zabar, zair, pesh, nothing like that. But make it easy for you. Mutawatir. We also call it tawatur. We also call it tawatur. It's just the root word of that word. Okay. What is mutawatir?
If a hadith has enough chains linked to it that it can't be refuted, there's too many evidences to show that it happened.
Yes, mass narration. It's a mass narrated hadith. Now what does that mean, mass narrated? Means that so many people have narrated this hadith that it's impossible for all those people to be lying about that one single thing. Because you would still expect one person or a second person to say that no, they're lying. But if all of them are agreeing on that this event took place, this is what the Prophet ﷺ said, yes, then that becomes mass narrated, that becomes mutawatir. To deny mutawatir is kufr, disbelief, takes you out of the fold of Islam. Now the whole of the Quran is mutawatir. The whole of the Quran is mutawatir. And when the Sahaba Ikram compiled the Quran in the time of Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, then they made sure that not to get confused with certain hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, they made sure that other Sahaba Ikram certify that this was a verse of the Quran. So that's when they would add it into the Quran. So the Quran that we have today is complete, and every single word, letter of it is mutawatir. I.e., you deny anything from it, it takes a person out of the fold of Islam. Okay, can I ask a question?
Sorry, not be going to the topic, but what's the difference between mutawatir hadith and sahih hadith?
I'll come to that. So what I was saying before, it's going to come when I speak, inshallah. The Quran, all of it is mutawatir. So you can't, if you deny anything of it, it takes you out of the fold of Islam. In Hadith Sharif, we have a special category which is called mutawatir itself. Which is called mutawatir itself. And again with that is the same. It's the same level as the Quran. So just the denying a verse of the Quran takes you out of the fold of Islam. If you deny a mutawatir hadith, hadith is the narrations from the Prophet ﷺ, they're not Quran. But if the hadith is on the level of mutawatir, then denying that, Aqidah, denying that, or whatever the Prophet ﷺ said, it takes you out of the fold of Islam as well. Yeah, they're on the same level. Now what's the difference between mutawatir and sahih? Sahih is grading the chain. Sahih is grading the chain. So the chain could be sahih, it could be hasan, it could be da'if. Yeah. Tawatur is slightly different to that. Tawatur has to be sahih, it has to be authentic. Yes. But they're not of the same kind. They're two different things. Sahih is in regards to the chain itself. That this chain is sahih. Hasan, we say, the chain is hasan. So that specific hadith which you've got, that one hadith which you got, you look at the chain of that and you grade that hadith. Okay. But if you get lots of hadith, mixture of hadith, yes, then what happens is that it can still be mutawatir. If you got a lot of Sahih hadith, then one chain is Da'if and the other one is Hasan, yeah? But they all indicate towards one thing. Then collectively what the Sahaba Ikram said, what the ulama said from the Prophet ﷺ, that still can become mutawatir. This is what we mean by decisive evidence. Decisive evidence. Another category is mashhur. Mashhur. It's slightly lower in rank than mutawatir, but it still allows us to take Islamic beliefs from it. Still allows us to take Islamic beliefs.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Ashhadu an la أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
So we talked about mutawatir. This is decisive evidence. We have another category which is mashhur. And at times we also use hadith mashhur to prove certain Islamic beliefs. And they will come in the course of this subject inshaAllah ta'ala. And we'll give you examples of them and I'll let you know that this is proven through hadith mashhur. We cannot use doubtful evidence. Yes? Because our belief has to remain strong. And if we have doubtful evidence, then this will cause, make more questions than belief.
If someone was to deny a mashhur hadith, what's the
Same ruling. Yeah. Even if it doesn't take him out of the fold of Islam, it will definitely take him out of the fold of Ahlul Sunnah. Okay. It just depends on the strength of what is proven from. Okay, the source is proven from. If you want common, but it's common in the sense of the ulama, so don't get it confused. A hadith can be common in terms of people always mention it. Yes, we don't mean it in that way, because in that case there's certain hadiths on the tongues of people which are not even hadith. They're not from the Prophet. So we don't mean it mashhur in that way. We mean it mashhur in terms of the amount of ulama that narrated it from the Sahaba Ikram. So the muhaddiseen, the amount of them. Similarly with mutawatir, it refers to those narrators, those muhaddiseen, those ulama that narrated from the Sahaba Ikram or the Sahaba themselves. They were in mass numbers. So hadith mashhur is on a similar level. Coming back to your question, it'll be kal mutawatir, similar to mutawatir, so it'll definitely make him misguided. And there will be examples of that within the course of this subject. Moving on, what's the subject of this science? The subject of this science. We call it the mawdu' or mawzu', subject. Just as a rule, to know the subject of any science that you're studying, look into of which thing you are talking in regards to, and what thing you are talking about in regards to the temporary states it has. It's a hard thing to understand and hard thing to explain. We call it awariz zatiyah, temporary states. For example, you come to medicine. What do we talk about in medicine? Yes? You hit the nail on the head. Okay. You talk about humans, don't you? Yes? What makes them healthy, what makes them ill, and then that's how you produce medicine for them in that way, cure. But being ill, being healthy, these are side effects of what entity? A human. Yes? The temporary states of a human. So for example, for medicine or for a doctor, the subject would be a human. If you come into grammar, you talk about temporary states such as how words are put together, yes, how to structure a sentence. So you understand from here is that you're talking about words. These are temporary states of words. So then the subject of grammar would be words, yes, or sentences as a whole. What about ilm tawheed? Why?
Because, for example, the human body, you can become ill, it can go into different states.
Yes.
You can get a fever, you can get a cold, you can catch a certain disease, whereas the belief of Tawheed remains the same. It can't
Yes.
change, it can't fluctuate.
That's right, what you're saying. But we don't mean awariz zatiyah in terms of in the examples that I gave, you picked up on a good point, is down to the individual, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes? But we mean that in terms of the subject, you discuss different parts of that of that entity, that individual. Yes? So it could be temporary states, but by temporary here we mean just different parts as well. Okay? So in terms of ilm tawheed, the mawzu, the subject, is Allah, the essence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself. Meaning we discuss regarding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How? For example, we're going to talk about, and this is ilm kalam al-ilm tawheed in a nutshell. Yes, if you really want to know an overall conclusion of what you study, this is a nutshell of it. This is a conclusion of it. What's that? We talk about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in terms of what's necessary for him, in terms of attributes. What is impossible for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And what is possible for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So you got 3 words, I might as well just tell you now. We'll do them separately sometime as well. You got wajib, some people call it mustahil. I find the easy word as muhal. It's easy to say. Okay, muhal. And then you got either imkan or mumkin. You can call it jawaz as well. Okay. Like the word jaiz. Okay. It comes from that, jawaz. Mumkin and jawaz is exactly the same. Wajib is everything that is necessary for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Muhal or mustahil is everything which is impossible for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And mumkin, can you all see that on the far end? No? We'll have to find a way to turn the board sometime, inshallah. And mumkin is that which is possible, everything which is possible for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then we also discuss in regards to the prophets of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But I'm going to tell you this still comes under them, one of them. And with the prophets of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, same thing. That what is necessary in terms of attributes, what is impossible, and what is possible. But this is still, because we said that we talked about regarding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, didn't we? So where did the prophets come from? Truth is, these are still part of what we mentioned regarding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because it's possible for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to send prophets. He didn't have to, did he? Was it necessary upon him to send prophets? No? No? Was it impossible for him? No, because prophets came, we know. So then he leaves only one category, that it was possible for him to send prophets. So we understand that when we talk regarding the prophets of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then really it's still to do with the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay? That we're saying that it's possible for him to send prophets. Okay? And that will come later on as well. Let's move on. Is who's the founder of this science? Truth is, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the founder of everything. But in terms of specific belief, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَا مِن قَبْلِكَ مِن رَسُولٍ إِلَّا نُوحِي إِلَيْهِ أَنَّهُ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا أَنَا فَاعْبُدُونَ. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, and we did not send any messengers before you, O Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, except that we revealed towards those prophets that came before you, what? La ilaha illa ana fa'budun, that there is no God worthy of worship except I, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, fa'budun, so worship me. I.e., He gave them the Aqidah, didn't He? He gave them the belief of La ilaha illallah. So in terms of that, He becomes the founder of it, but the truth is, He's the founder of everything. He created everything. In terms of who is associated to in this day and age, it's associated to two Imams. There is the first Sheikh Abu Mansur al-Maturidi, and the second is Abu al-Hasan al-Ash'ari. The first one is Abu Mansur Maturidi. Second one is Abu Hasan al-Ash'ari. And why is it associated to them? The reason it's associated to them because they wrote books on this subject. They organized this science. And they removed doubts which deviant sects had placed upon Islam. So they had removed them by writing on them. So hence it was associated to these two masters of this science. So you got Sheikh Abu Mansur al-Maturidi and you have Sheikh Abu Hasan al-Ash'ari. This is why you will see people will say we are Maturidi, some will say we are Ashari. They're both part of the Ahlul Sunnah. This is Sunni Islam for you in terms of belief. In fiqh we have 4 imams. In Aqidah we have 2 imams. And these are the 2 imams which they are associated to. Okay. As per ourselves, we tend to think of ourselves as being Maturidi. Yes. But generally people will say they are Ashari. Those differences will come, and inshallah ta'ala we will highlight them in their rightful time of what differences there are between Asharis and Maturidis. They're not major differences to say that a person is after the fault of Islam or a person becomes a deviant. They're just minor differences in terms of principles. Yes. But they are there too. But I like to look at it as that every Maturidi is a Ashari. But not every Ashari is a Maturidi. So be a Maturidi, you're on the safe side. Makes sense, doesn't it? Logically. If every Maturidi is an Ashari and not every Ashari is a Maturidi, then to have both in your life, become Maturidi. Yes. So they are the people who the science is associated to. Just because they wrote books on it and they were the ones who organized this science. These are all these 3 things that I've told you in regards to the definition, in regards to the subject, and in regards to the founder of this science. These are 3 things which you should always look for before starting into a science. There's 10, we're going to do them after Salah inshallah ta'ala. They will go quick and then we'll move on to the next subject inshallah. We'll take a break for Asr prayer inshallah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Before the break we spoke on the definition of Ilm Tawheed. We spoke on the subject of Ilm Tawheed and also the founder or who this science is associated to. We spoke on that. These are 3 things which you should commonly know about them. But roughly there are 10 principles, or we call them Mabadi Ashar. 10 starting points which you should always know regarding a science. The next one is its fadl, its bounty, its virtue. And the ulama said that Ilm Tawheed, Aqidah, is one of the most honorable sciences that you can study. And in fact, it's really the Ra'is, the leader and the rule of every science. If you want to make it more particular, then in terms of Islamically. So it's virtuous, it's honorable, and is also the leader of every other science. For example, if you take fiqh, then for your fiqh to be correct, you have to believe that there is one Lord. So Aqidah really becomes a leader or the rule of fiqh. In terms of Quran, in terms of Hadith, for you to study those sciences, then the belief has to be, if you really want to benefit from Quran and Hadith. Otherwise you'll become, I think, an Orientalist. You become one of those and you just go through the Quran and take whatever you want, whatever means something to you. And you see some of these translations of Orientalists, especially on Sufi works, where specifically with Sheikh Akbar, Sheikh Ibn Arabi, they take his books from, for example, from his Futuhat, and they translate certain parts of it, but they give it a twist of the Orientalism, and they present it, and half the time he hasn't even written those things, and you're picking up those books and you're reading them. Meaning, what happens with that is then, if you don't have the correct belief, then whatever you want to take, you take, and whatever you want to leave, you leave. There's nothing binding you to be sincere with what you are reading. So hence why belief is still important to study Quran and Hadith. The next one is its relation into other sciences. And we've already given you that it's the root of every science. It's the root of every science, and I've just given you example of that, of how it is. The next one is the name of this science. What's this science called? Ilm al-Tawheed. Another name I gave you was Ilm al-Kalam. Ilm al-Kalam. Aqidah. We call it Aqidah. Aqidah in this day and age. Why do we call it Ilm al-Tawheed? It's called Ilm al-Tawheed because of what it's based on. And that is more or less the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yes? His existence is His uniqueness, is His oneness. So hence they work together. So that's why we call it Ilm al-Tawheed. We call it Ilm al-Kalam. Kalam means speech, doesn't it? Speech. That's theology then, isn't it? Yes. Aqidah really, or Kalam, why we call it Kalam is because the belief that you have is really something that you can only express by words. You can only express by words, can you? You can't draw a graph, can you? God is one and draw a graph. Can't do that. Yes? You can't practically show your belief, can you? You can't cut your heart out and say, this is what my belief is. You can't do that. So the only way you can express it is through your words, and that's either Quran, Hadith, or logical evidence. That brings us to the next thing, and that is istimdad. Where does this science take its proofs from? As in, what aids this science? We said before, what was it? What's the first thing we look at in terms of deriving Aqidah? Quran. I missed one thing in the previous in the name, and that was Aqidah. We also call it Aqidah, don't we? Why do we call it Aqidah? Aqidah comes from Aqd or Iqd, one of the two. If it's Aqd, then Aqd means a knot. Yes. So you're more or less tying yourself and binding yourself to this belief. And it's called Iqd. Iqd is like a necklace of diamonds. The reason Aqidah is by that name because you bind all your beliefs into one necklace and you become precious. Yes? So that's why it's called Aqidah. Coming back to the next one was that where it takes its support from. The first is Quran. Sometimes I'll call the Quran as Kitab. We tend to just use that for the Quran as well. And specifically in Ilm Kalam, in terms of the text that you might be reading, they'll use the word Kitab, they might use the word Mushaf. That means the Quran in written form. Quran in written form, okay? And sometimes when he used the word Quran, and he referred to the intrinsic speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The next, what else is it can it be proven from? After Quran? Yes. Yeah, mutawatir hadith. We can know that as the sunnah. We can know that as the sunnah. What else? Logic. Okay. The third one is logic. The next thing you need to know from the 10 is the hukm al-shari'. What does Sharia, what's the command of Sharia regarding this science? So in regards to Ilm Kalam, Ilm Tawheed and Aqidah, it is fard aini. Fard aini. Upon every single mukallaf. Meaning person who's burdened by Sharia. An adult, so to speak. Now what does that mean? That means that a person who has reached the age of puberty, the person who has become an adult, he's healthy, everything's okay with him, then for him to study this science and know the basic beliefs of Islam is fard. We added a word after this which was aini. Explained that in the last session. Aini is that it is an individual fard upon a person. As in, you have two types of fards. One is aini and one is kifaya. For the ain and for the kifaya. For the ain is every person has an individual responsibility to do that. Like we just read Namaz Asr. Salatul Asr is individually. I can't pray Salatul Asr for you, can I? No, can't do it. You can't pray mine. It can't happen. It's individual fard. But then you have fard kifaya. The opposite of it is fard kifaya. Fard kifaya is a fard which is really upon the community. Meaning if one or two people or three people out of the community do this certain action, then the obligation is lifted from the rest of the community. Like Salatul Janazah. Yes, if a couple of people read Salatul Janazah, those people that didn't attend the Janazah, the fard is lifted from them. But if nobody does it, if no one prays the Janazah, then the whole community is sinful. Yes, that makes sense? So in regards to Ilmul Kalam and Ilmul Tawheed or Aqidah, on his basic level, just knowing the sets of beliefs of Islam, then what? It is fard aini. It is farz aini, as in an individual responsibility of every single person who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has obligated. And why do I say in its basic? Yes, we can talk about the qawaid as well, can't we? The principles, but we can't expect every single layman to know principles. Yes. Then we have muftis everywhere, and we'll have lots of fatwas. We'll be in trouble then. So for that reason, because it's not in the capacity of every single person to attain those principles, that's why it's not necessary for them to know those principles. But to know that belief that God is one, that's essential. That is necessary, and that's the essential of Islam. What are the benefits of this science? That's the next one. Success in both worlds. So the fruits and the benefits of Ilmu Tawheed, Aqidah, is that you will be successful in both worlds and you protect your Islamic beliefs. You protect your Islamic beliefs. So this is the benefit of studying the science. So once you've completed this Aqidah lessons that we have 35, I believe there are. Once you finish them, then you should have this benefit in mind that I'm strong in my Aqidah, I should be successful in both worlds in terms of Aqidah, that inshallah we die as Muslims, and also that in this life you've protected your own Aqidah. That's the fruits of it. That you won't waver when others say things to you. If an atheist comes, there's no God, you won't waver, you'll say there is a God and there's one God, and you know the proofs for it as well, inshallah. Then we have its masail. This is the last one, the masail. It's matters, what we discuss. Then that's the book itself. That's the whole of the subject, the whole science. Every Aqidah that we're going to look into, they are the masail. The reason I gave you these in the starting was because the 10 things, and before you start anything, even in your secular sciences, if you study in university a certain subject, then if you look into these 10 things, you'll have an insight into where you're heading, and you'll know what your goal is. Sometimes we can enter a classroom and stay for 35 weeks and then at the end of it not know why we were here. So these are 10 things. Just take note of them again, just the 10 itself. So first we had the definition. Yeah? And we told you the definition of Ilmu Tawheed. Before any science, know the definition of that science. Then we had the second one was the subject of that science. So number one was the definition, second one was its subject. And for ilm kalam, we said the subject is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The third one was its founder, or who this science is associated to. And we said that for ilm tawheed, it was that it is the founder is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the truth is that He's the founder of everything. But it is associated to Imam Abu Mansur Maturidi and Imam Abu Hassan al-Ash'ari. That was number three. These three are the most important. Then you got the bounty and the honor of this science. And we told you that it is the most honorable science. The truth is, if you ever look into this and look into the ulama and you ask this question, what's the bounty, what's the virtue of this science? They have husnul zan. Yeah. They're not really going to write it that, there's no point you learning this science, there's not much in it. Yeah. You're going to close the book and go. Yes. So they try to always incite you to carry on reading and make you interested in the subject. So you'll see this sentence in literally every book regarding every single subject. That's the most honorable science that you could study. It's not exactly going to say the opposite of that. So it's husnul zan that they have, that there must be a purpose behind this science. That was the fourth one. Fifth one is association to other sciences. And we said regarding this that it's the root of every science. The root of every science. Then you should know the name of that science. The number 6, the name of that science. The names of the science can also give you a massive heads up into which way you're heading. Yes. And the truth is, Islamically, we tend to keep our the names of each science very simple. In English, they tend to just go towards Latin or other languages, and then you're totally confused of what is this science. Yes. In Islamically, we tend to just keep it basic ilm tawheed. So every Muslim know what tawheed is. So he knows what, he also gets the purpose, everything in one shot. As soon as he hears it, he knows. You say FIqh, you can have a basic understanding of FIqh regarding it. So his name, that's next, and we've done that. The one after this, number 7, is what aids this subject. So you should know everything regarding that science, or where it gets its aid from, what supports it. Number 8, the Shari'i ruling on that science. The Shari'i ruling on that science. Meaning, is it fard for you to study? Is it wajib for you to study? Is it just mustahab for you to study? Is it obligation? Is it necessary? Or is it just merely recommended for you to study it? Or is it completely useless? Yes. So you have to look into these things. Truth is, regarding this one, the hukam of a science can change in regards to your time. So there could be, in terms of secular sciences, there could be sciences which in your time could be fard upon you, for you to study. And then other science may be just mustahab. And then a time might come where the tide completely changes. The one that was fard in the past maybe now becomes mustahab. And the one that was mustahab in the past now becomes fard. But that's in terms of secular sciences. Quran, Hadith, Aqidah, these will always stay the same. The 9th one was the benefit of this science. So you should always know what the benefit is, what you hope to achieve. So here we said what? That the benefit of ilm tawheed and studying ilm tawheed is to be successful in both worlds, not to put a kufr fatwa on somebody. Okay? So you don't read ilm kalam for that reason, is to protect yourself. Protect yourself and protect people around you. And then the last one is masail. Masail will always be the subject matters of that book. So whatever you discuss within the book, whatever you discuss in the science, that will be its matters. So these are 10 principles that you should note down and always look into. Even if the teacher does not tell you them, just personally yourself, just go out and look into those things so that you have a better insight into the subject. We'll move on towards FIqh. We'll do the same with this as well in regarding these 10 principles, but we'll go through them quickly inshallah. So in terms of the definition, Ilmul Fiqh is a science of Islamic rulings It's a science of Islamic ruling, but far'i. Far'i. In Islam, you have two types of ahkam. Ahkam Sharia. You have usul and then you have furu'. Usul are the roots and furu' are the branches. Usul is like your Aqidah. Asal. Yeah? Aqidah is what you just did before. That is your roots. As in, if you deny that, then you can be out of the fold of Islam and so on and so forth. Then you have the furu', they're the branches. In the branches, if the ulama will have dispute amongst them, like the 4 imams of the Ahlul Sunnah, they have dispute amongst themselves, but it doesn't really matter, it's just a minor. So where you can look at it is that fiqh is a science of Islamic minor law. Islamic, just translate for E as minor, and then usul will translate as major. So is a science of Islamic minor law. But where is it proven from? Proven from Adillah Tafsiliyah. Okay. Tafsiliyah has many meanings from Mufassala, as in explained or expansive evidence. Yes, expansive evidence or self-explained evidence. Take out self actually. Explained evidence. What does that mean? All this means is that fiqh is a science of rulings. So ahkam is a science of laws, but those laws are obviously they're Islamic laws, but they are minor. And like I said, there can be disputes in them. So if there is somebody denying something, another person proving something, then it doesn't really matter as long as they are not related to usul. As in, they're not related to major things which are of Islam. But they're proven from Adillah Tafsiliyah, explained or expansive evidence. That could be a verse of the Quran, but then that verse of the Quran is explained. How can it be explained? That can be explained by principles. Of how you derive from Quran and Hadith. So there are sets of rules as well, but that's different. That's usulul fiqh. We're doing fiqh. In usulul fiqh, it'll be a set of principles. In fiqh, it's proven from explained evidence. And what's that? That could be a verse of the Quran, and then that verse of the Quran is explained maybe by a scholar. He opens it up, he tells us what each and every single word means, And then once it's explained, we can derive our rulings and take our rulings. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Aqimu salah. Aqimu means establish, salah refers to salah, but we don't really know in the Quran what salah means. So we might go to Hadith Sharif, and the Sahaba Ikram say that the Prophet read salah like this. So now we found a definition of salah, haven't we? That he stood, he did ruku, he did sajda, he did tashahhud, he gave salam at the end. Yes? That's a complete definition of salah now, isn't it? The alim will then attach that to maybe the word salah, and that ayat is now explained, isn't it? It makes more sense. So that's what I mean by tafseeliyah. So it's explained, then we can derive ruling from that this is a salah. But we still fari, isn't it? Because we had to take it from Hadith Sharif, and there might be another Hadith Sharif which says maybe something different. Hence why you then would get the difference between the Shafi method of praying salah and the Hanafi method of praying salah. So this is just the definition of ilmul fiqh. What is the subject? The subject of this science is the actions of the mukallaf. Mukallaf is, this word is any person who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has burdened with the sharia. That's us basically. Yeah. Meaning anybody who namaz is upon, then he has to pray. So that person is a mukallaf. If you want a proper definition of mukallaf, a mukallaf is that person who completes 4 conditions. Okay. First is that he should be at the age of maturity. He should have intellect. And Dawat Islami should have reached him. Not our Dawat Islami, meaning the call of Islam. Yes, the call towards Islam, that has reached him, meaning somebody invited him into Islam. That's the third one. And the last one is, in a nutshell, for him to be healthy. Meaning there shouldn't be any illnesses which may stop him from understanding. Salamatul hawas, meaning take your 5 senses. If a person has none of the 5 senses, then that person is not burdened by Islam. So if you look at all again, bulugh is for a child to accept Islam is not necessary. For a child under the age of puberty, and by default the age of puberty is 15 for boys and girls. If no signs of puberty appear by the age of 15, every boy or a girl by default will be an adult and it's fard for them to pray. So if they're young, 6 years old, 5, 6 years old, then there is no salah upon them and no other burden to say La ilaha illallah. Have intellect, meaning they should be able to understand things. If a person is insane, then Sharia is not upon him. Dawat Islami, for that to reach them, meaning if the call of Islam hasn't reached them, then it's not necessary. We will talk about that later on in Ilmul Kalam. Okay? If according to Maturidis and Imam Abu Hanifa, is it necessary for the call of Islam to reach that person? Okay? But it's mentioned here anyway. And then the last one was for your senses to be intact. Okay? If none of them are there, then the person is not burdened. But if one of them is there, then the person is still burdened. 2 and Aql and Salamatul Hawas. Intellect is that you can understand things, yes, but the truth is really that the ways of understanding things are through the 5 senses as well, yes. The point is that if this is why we're saying that if one of the senses are intact, that you can see, then you're still burdened, because that means you can still understand with your intellect, if the person is not insane. But look at it this way, the difference between them would be that aql, the opposite of it is insanity, isn't it? So aql, he would refer to a person being sane. The opposite of it is insanity, that a person is insane. That's not the opposite of the five senses, is it? If a person doesn't have the five senses, it doesn't mean that he's insane. He can still be intellectual, he can still be sane. All it is, he has no way of attaining things. Yes, but his brain may be fully intact. Okay? So this is why we're saying that if one sense out of the five senses is intact, then that person is still burdened by Sharia. So that's what taklif is. If these conditions are found inside a person, he becomes a mukallaf. So going back to where we were in terms of the subject of fiqh. The subject of fiqh is the actions of the mukallaf. So the person who fulfills those four conditions, we talk about his actions. Yes, so his actions are the subject of this. You know, what is halal, what is haram, what is permissible for him to do, what's not permissible for him to do. Okay, what is sunnah, what is mustahab, what is makruh, you know, so on, so forth. We're going to go through all those terms, inshallah. Okay. So we look into that. So that is the subject of this science. Then you have who this science is associated to. Truth is, the founder of this science is Allah and His Messenger sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam. Doesn't Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tell us certain commands in the Quran? And sometimes He even explains of how a certain action is done. And the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam is the founder of this, that the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam taught us how to do certain actions as well. Yes? So when we talk about the actions of a mukallaf, and the Prophet taught us how the actions of that mukallaf should be. Take salah for example. Imamat, Sayyidina Jibreel came, he read prayer with the Prophet sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam. So what happened was, when he read prayer with the Prophet, that taught the Sahaba Ikram of how you become an Imam and how you become the Muqtadi. So the Prophet is the founder of this. But generally is associated to the four Imams. You have Imam Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah ta'ala. We have Imam Malik bin Anas, we have Imam Shafi'i, and we have Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal. These are the four Imams, and they have four schools. The school of Imam Abu Hanifa is called the Hanafi school. That's us. I hope all of us. Anybody Shafi, Maliki, Hanbali? It's good, inshallah. Makes life easy. I used to, in another class, I used to have a Shafi brother, and he was trying to understand the Hanafi fiqh. He actually studied all the way to Quduri, but he never converted to Hanafi. I tried a lot, but he never converted. So the Shafi'is, the followers of Imam Shafi are Shafi'is. The followers of Imam Malik are Malikis. And then you have the followers of Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal are called Hanbalis. But the truth is that there are no Hanbalis in the world except for a few, and they are more or less scholars. Amongst the Awam, there are no Hanbalis left. Okay? People will claim to be Hanbalis, but they're not. Okay? You will find some Iraqi scholars and some Syrian scholars, fair few of the places, just ulama who are following the Hanbali school of thought. In terms of the general public, I've heard from ulama that generally no one follows the Hanbali school of thought as of now. So they are the founding fathers, and the reason for it is that the truth is Sahaba Ikram were people who taught us how to pray as well. But it's not associated to them. Why? Because when people came to them, they just taught them the deen. When he came to Imam Abu Hanifa, he was the first person to actually organize this science. So when he organized it, he was associated to him. Like Imam Shafi said that we are, in terms of fiqh, we are the offspring of Imam Abu Hanifa. or we are in need of Imam Abu Hanifa. If you don't want to translate as offspring, then we translate as that. He's trying to say we are in need of Imam Abu Hanifa. That we always have to go back to some of his principles to understand the religion. So that's why it's associated to these people. Then you have its virtue, the virtue of this science. The virtue of this science is that it's the best science. It's the most honorable science and is the root of every science. In truth, number 4 and 5, we tend to just do them together because they're more or less the same, aren't they? So the virtue and its relation to the sciences, they're more or less the same thing. So in terms of its virtue, is that the best science is a science that is very honorable and is the root of all sciences. Fiqh means understanding. You have to have understanding of every science. Yes? Its relation to other sciences, here we make a difference because its relation towards Quran and Hadith is that it's the offspring of Quran and Hadith. Is the child of Quran and Hadith. Meaning it brings Quran and Hadith together. And for every other science, then it becomes the root of that science. For every other science, understanding. Ulama write that the only person that you can call an alim is a person who has studied fiqh. Okay? The person who you can only call an alim is the person who has studied fiqh. You can't call a mufassir an alim, and you can't call a muhaddis an alim. And a person from the mutakallimin. In ilm al-kalam, the scholars of ilm al-kalam, you call them mutakallimin. We don't call them alim as well. Imam Ahmad Raza Khan writes this. So he says that the person who has studied fiqh, he is a person who is an alim. Technical issues. What I'm trying to say is that it shows the importance of this science. So if you're part of an alim course, then the main thing within this course that you should be studying to become an alim is fiqh and usulul fiqh. Two major sciences for you to study. Its name is ilmul fiqh. The word fiqh means understanding. Its hukam, where it gets its sources from, what supports it. We have adilla arba'ah. Adilla arba'ah. Take a note of this. The first one will be Quran. I'll write kitab instead. Sunnah. Three is ijma. Number 4 is qiyas. These are the sources or qiyas. Qiyas. The 4 sources or those evidences which support ilmul fiqh. The first one is kitab, the Quran, i.e. the Quran supports ilmul fiqh. We derive from the Quran. The second one is sunnah, that's hadith. And we can take from every type of hadith. Yes. Other than which hadith? Which one? What hadith can't we derive from? No, we can derive from da'if as well. In fiqh we can derive from da'if as well. Fabricated. We don't take from fabricated hadith, do we? Because we don't even class that as hadith. On tongues we might just call it hadith, but the truth is not when hadith is fabricated, once it's got the hukam.
What's the word for fabricated?
Mawdu'. Yeah. Mawdu'. Fabricated hadiths are called mawdu'. If we got time towards the end of this course, I might just add a subject in and we'll do ilmul hadith. Yeah? Just to go through basic terminology so that you know what they mean as well. It's good to know these things. So sunnah. We can derive from za'if hadith as well in fiqh. Yeah? Get this mentality out of your heads. It's a wrong mentality and it comes from a certain group where they say you can't derive from da'if hadith. Yes? We can derive from da'if hadith as well. Da'if hadith is still a hadith. The muhaddith is still saying that these are the words of the Prophet ﷺ. All it is, there are certain people in there, maybe their memory wasn't as strong. Yes, so maybe they could not remember the exact words of the Prophet ﷺ or what the Sahabi had narrated to the next person. Yeah? So that's why it becomes slightly weak. But for example, if you have 4 or 5 hadiths on the same subject, talking about the same event, yes, but in each chain of narration, there is a person whose memory is weak, or he has some kind of blame upon him, which then makes that chain of narration very weak. But collectively, you have these 5 or 6 narrations or more, 10 maybe. They're talking about the same event, but they come from different ways. Not the same chain of narration, but different chains of narration. Yeah? This hadith will then become hasan, and we can still derive from it. And there's many things like that which we have in fiqh which we derive from as well. Okay, like that from da'if hadith. So this rant and rave that people have is that you Hanafis, you don't follow hadith. This hadith says this. Yes. And yet you're quoting a hadith, this one's in Bukhari and you're quoting somewhere in Tibrani somewhere. Yes. You have to understand one thing as well is that our sources come from Imam Abu Hanifa and the early ages. Okay? So when he had the hadith, it might have been authentic. All is when he reached us and when he reached the rest of the muhaddithin, there were people in between that might have been weak. But when he was giving the ruling, when he was taking it from the companions and various other tabi'een, then there was only a few people, wasn't there? Yes, and they were strong people. So you have to look at that as well. But anyway, the third one is ijma'. Ijma', consensus. Ijma' of the ummah, consensus of the ummah. The whole ummah? Does it have to be consensus of the whole ummah? No? Of who then? The scholars, the ulama, and the righteous ulama. The righteous ulama. It's a condition. The righteous ulama have to make consensus. Regarding consensus is a very detailed subject. For example, look, Imam Malik doesn't accept consensus of the whole ummah, as in terms of his fiqh. He'll say we'll go with the consensus of the people of Medina. Okay. So whatever the actions of the people of Medina was, whatever they agreed upon, then that's the consensus. So on and so forth. So this is kind of detailed, but generally as Hanafis, whatever the ulama agree on, and there's different levels of consensus. For example, take the consensus of the Sahaba. The consensus of the Sahaba, for all the Sahaba Ikram to agree on something, okay, that consensus, to deny that consensus, or whatever that consensus is stating, to deny is kufr. It's disbelief. The reason for that is the consensus of the Sahaba Ikram is equal to one verse of the Quran. It's mutawatir then, isn't it? Yes, the Sahaba saying something is mutawatir, and all of them. For example, the Khilafah of Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. So when he became Khalifa, no Sahabi went against him becoming Khalifa. Hence, according to us, if a person denies the Caliphate or Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq to be a Khalifa of Islam, denies that, then he is out of the fold of Islam. Okay? So for example, that's a consensus. And then it goes lower in degree from that. Consensus of ulama in this day and age, it depends what type of consensus it is, on what it's on. But most to most, if ulama agree on something, then we'll say, and another person, a lay person then denies it, then we'll say that person is misguided. Yeah. In terms of that. But it depends obviously upon what they made a consensus on. Some people outright say that there's no consensus in this day and age. Yes. The last one was qiyas. Qiyas is simple, but very detailed. Making an analogy between two things, that's all it is. For example, the Quran says that khamr, alcohol is haram. And then the mujtahid will think that what's the cause behind khamr being haram, alcohol being haram. Before I carry on, you can only do qiyas if it's not found in the rest. You can only do ijma if it's not found in Quran and Hadith. So they're in order. If something in Kitabullah, then there's no need to go to Sunnah. If something is in Kitab and Hadith, then there's no need to go towards ijma. If something in all of these three, then you don't need to go towards qiyas. Just wasting energy. Yes. So we go to qiyas when we've looked everywhere else. We looked in terms of Quran, Hadith, we looked towards ijma, we found nothing. Then we do qiyas. So for example, take alcohol. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said khamr is haram, so alcohol is haram. But then we had weed, cocaine, other spirits of alcohol that you have. What hukum shall we put upon these? So then the mujtahid looks in all of the Quran, Hadith, and really he doesn't find anything, for example's sake. Then what happens is that he does a qiyas. He finds that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made alcohol haram. So he looks, what was the main reason why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made alcohol haram? The only logical conclusion he gets to is intoxication. Yes? That it makes him a bit woozy and his brain goes all over the place. Yes? And it makes him lose control of himself. He's intoxicated. So then he makes an analogy that alcohol is haram because it has intoxication in it. Then this list of things should be also haram because it has the same cause, the same illah. So then that's the analogy. The hukum of alcohol was that it is haram. The hukum of this would be haram. But there's a slight difference, isn't there? And the slight difference is alcohol, for example, alcohol that's derived from grapes is haram qat'i. It's decisively haram because of the verse of the Quran. So what it will mean is that if a person denies that, he's out of the fold of Islam. Here it's not as easy as that. Yes? Because this was through a logical understanding of a scholar. He had to think for himself. Look, isn't it easy for another scholar to say that you took out the reasoning for alcohol being haram to be intoxication? That's your understanding of it. Another scholar could say something else. He could say something else. I'll make one up. Drinking too much liquid intoxicates. For example, alcohol, if you drink it, intoxicates. You drink it to a certain level, that's when it intoxicates. You drink lassi too much and you'll have the same effects as well. So, I'm just trying to show you, it's absurd, but another person could argue in that manner. So that makes it zanni. It's kind of doubtful.
So if someone was to deny that taking And then other talks kind of like, okay, no, weed
Yes.
was haram if they denied that.
We won't put kufr fatwa on him then. But we'll say he's misguided because more or less the ulama ikram, majority of them have more or less agreed upon it. Yes? So, but there's a difference as well in terms of how you deny something as well. If it's a scholar denying it and he's got backing for it, then there's no hukum upon him.
Is there any scholar who presented that case?
No.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Can I just ask about this qiyas? Is there any sect which don't use this sort of using analogy or
Yes.
logic?
There's the Zahiriya who don't do qiyas as well.
Is that
Okay.
the reason behind it, or I mean, like you wouldn't be able to derive the fact that all these other drugs are also haram.
Yes.
You didn't use that. So what is their justification?
There's many justifications. They say the Quran has everything in it and is clear cut. Okay. The truth is they will make qiyas somewhere along the lines, but they won't call it as qiyas. Okay. But you do have people like that. Certain sects in our day and age say they don't do qiyas, but then when you read all the fatwas, they have qiyas in there. Meaning in this day and age, if you look at certain sects, they say, what is fiqh, what is this, why are you following the imam, why are you doing this? Yes. But then when you look towards their own fatwas, they're doing everything we're doing. Yeah? So it's kind of absurd for them to do stuff like that. But you do have people who outright deny it as well. If you ever look into history, you'll find that majority of the Spanish scholars followed that position, that they denied qiyas. Okay. It's just that they weren't exactly against the qiyas itself. They were just against that. How can we bring something into the religion which may have not been there? Yes, but we prove it that when a companion of the Prophet ﷺ went towards Yemen, I believe it was Mu'az bin Jabal, if I'm wrong, forgive me, when the Prophet ﷺ sent him towards, and the Prophet was sending him off, and the Prophet was crying and they were sending him off as well, but they were asking him questions, that if so-and-so asks you such and such thing, how would he answer it? The truth was, he said that I would look into the Quran, then I would look into the Sunnah. Yes, Ijma wasn't in their time, was it? That came later on because the Prophet was alive. The Prophet was there. So if there was any problem, they just asked the Prophet ﷺ. There was no need for Ijma. So in the time of the Prophet, there was no Ijma. So then he went from Sunnah and he said that I would look back into the Quran and Hadith and try to find something similar. Yeah? He never called it Qiyas, but we call that Qiyas then, don't we? So then that's how we prove the Qiyas itself. That is an evidence for us. Ijma has several levels, but the highest level is decisive. As we said regarding the ijma of the Sahaba. That's decisive. That will take a person out of the fold of Islam. So there are the Adilla Arba. We call them Adilla Arba. But I'll tell you one thing. Shafi's blame is for that you say you have 4 proofs. The truth is every school, from the 4 schools of thought, all of them more or less accept these this baseline basically. There's 4 adillah that you have, 4 evidences, but the Shafis blame us for something. And they say, you have a 5th one. You're going to say, what's the 5th one? The 5th one we have, or which they say is number 5, is called istihsan. I'm not going to write it on the board because you're going to get confused. Okay? It's called istihsan. And there's a lot of rulings in Hanafi fiqh which we class as istihsan. Istihsan. But the reason I want to mention that is because the Shafis blame us to have 5. We don't have 5. Really, istihsan is still part of qiyas. Yes? The only difference is there's 2 types of qiyas according to us. In an easy way, one qiyas, the first qiyas is a light qiyas, and the second qiyas is a deeper qiyas. Okay? So just the example that I gave you, that was just a light qiyas. Qiyas khafi, if you like. Sorry, that's qiyas jali. Okay? Light as in apparent. Yes, it's straightforward. Then you have a deeper qiyas which is qiyas khafi. Qiyas khafi, which you really have to go in depth and really find something, and then you'll do a qiyas that way. Yes, and many times what happens is that the istihsan seems to be the opposite of the ruling of the apparent qiyas. But the reason we do that is because the istihsan is based upon either Quran and Hadith. But always we went so into depth in Quran and Hadith, we had to look into it deeply and then we derive that ruling. Okay. When an example of that comes, inshallah ta'ala, I'll let you know, and you'll be able to understand it even better, inshallah ta'ala. The reason I want to mention that is because a lot of people in our day and age will pick up on that word, istihsan, and say, oh, where does that come from? So you should know that it's really qiyas. All it is, there's two types of qiyas. One is qiyas jali, the apparent, the light qiyas, just on top. And then there is a deeper qiyas, that's called qiyas khafi. Okay? So this word will keep popping up. There's many examples of it that we have. Then you have the hukm of sharia upon the science. On its basic level is fard ain. Again, because we study namaz in it, don't we? Yes, tahara, namaz, fasting, and so on and so forth. So regarding all of them, they fard ain upon you. Everything about them will be fard ain upon you as well, on its basic level. So then it becomes fard ain for you to study. Hence, when in last week I said to you that essentially this course is a fard ain course as well. All it is, we're giving the extra detail. For example, in a fard ain course, I wouldn't mention istihsan. In a fard ain course, I wouldn't mention these four adillah. Okay? You wouldn't get this in the fard ain course. It'll just be namaz is fard. Takbir tahrima is fard. That'll be a fard ain course. Yes? The times of salah, you know them, you go on your way and pray. Yeah? But this is extra detail that we will give you in like in the Dars Nizami course or something like this. So it's fard ain. But in terms of the rest of it, the details of it, for the ulama is fard kifaya. For the ulama is fard kifaya. To a point, you still have to have at least one alim in your community. Yes. Have one alim in your community who can then serve the people. And if you don't have that, then that community is sinful. Okay. Hence why you should invest your money in local institutes. Yeah. You're going to send it abroad, then he's going to serve his community and you're still going to be sinful. Because you don't have an alim in your community. The fruits of this science. Success in both worlds. That's the fruit of this science. They'll have success in both worlds, and you protect your actions. You protect your actions. You protect your worship. Okay. Last one is masail. What are the masail of ilm al-fiqh? That'll be everything you study. Okay. That'll be the subject itself. Yes. Cleanliness, salah, you have fasting, you're going to be doing zakat and hajj. Okay. We're only going to be doing the ibadat. So just the worship. Yeah. We won't have time to do trade, we won't have time to do nikah, talaq and things like this. They're very detailed subject as well. But if you enroll onto the Dars Nizami course, then you'll get to do that, inshallah. Okay. So these are the masail of this subject. Okay. Any questions on any of the two subjects that we've done today? Next week, we're going to start the Aqidah lesson, as in we're going to start looking into the sets of beliefs. So be prepared for it. I told you that we'll be doing Bahare Shari'at. Bahare Shari'at. If you haven't got it, you can You can find, if you can read Urdu, then you can get Dawat Islami's copy, which is probably the best copy I have seen. Okay, that's the Dawat Islami version. The only reason is that it's nicely laid out and it's easy to find something. I have 3 other versions of Bahari Shariat, and believe me, you can't find anything in them. You read something, it takes a whole day just to find it again. Yes, because they all come together. This is probably the best edition that you will find of Bahari Shariat. Oops. Bahari Shariat. The fiqh book that we will be following is Nurul Idah. Nurul Idah. What was it called again? Light of clarification. Okay. You can have that as well, inshallah ta'ala. We will have a surf book. I'm not starting surf today. There's a particular reason for it. The brothers might, the book that I mentioned last week, they might have it printed in a week or so. So we'll try to wait for that. If they don't have it by next week, inshallah ta'ala, we'll go into an introduction into that. There's not much of an introduction to it. We just go into the deep end with that. So we'll start that from next week, inshallah ta'ala. From next week in Bahari Shariat, we're going to be going into the sets of beliefs themselves. Okay, so be prepared for that. And in regards to fiqh, we're going to be going into, we won't be starting Nurul Idah per se itself, but we're going to be going into certain terminologies, okay, which you as Hanafis should know. Okay, meaning what farz is, what's the definition of farz, wajib, things like this. And regarding our Hanafi Imams as well, who are our Imams, who do we take from, who do we follow, and what terms we give them. Okay, we have certain, Hanafi fiqh is a very complex fiqh. Yes, we have 3 Imams, because of that it makes it very, very complicated. So we give each Imam a certain term, which we will use, and I'll say these terms commonly, so you should know what those terms are and who it refers to. Just makes life a lot easier than juggling with names. Okay, so we'll do that next week, inshallah ta'ala. Any questions? No questions? I'll let you go early this week, inshallah.